participants are William Fisher, and Mike Reynolds. We join their conversation in the faculty lounge.
Then you went to some graduate education.
I did. I'd had the bachelor's degree, of course, when I was in college, and had 3 years in the Air Force. And then I decided when I was in the Air Force, I was stationed in Korea. And in those days it was rather a desolate area and really not much to do. And I had had enough accounting from my undergraduate degrees to qualify to be a teacher for the University of Maryland Extension Service.
Wow.
And so I was authorized to teach accounting to airmen and officers who wanted to take that, because again, when you're in the military, that's a great opportunity for educational experiences. And my first opportunity and I found I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved to teach.
Wow.
And so that, if anything, kind of oriented me toward academic life and teaching. That was my experience in the military. So I knew you weren't going to get any place unless you had a Ph.D. So I came back on an MBA in finance, and then I got a Ph.D. in educational administration, thinking that maybe I'd be dean of a school someplace, possibly president of a university or whatever, but the vagaries of life took me in another direction, so I didn't follow that.
So that direction led you to Chicago.
Well, after I finished the Ph.D., I bumped into the dean of my undergraduate school, and he said, "Bill, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just finishing the Ph.D., and now I think I'm going to send out my resume and so on." And he said, "Well, why don't you come teach with us?" And he said, "This will probably stand you in good stead for whatever you want to do in your life, but it's probably teaching." And he had the opening and so on. So I agreed to teach accounting and finance at the School of Hotel Administration at Cornell. And so that's how I, again, with my love of teaching, which I found out about in the Air Force, we really enjoyed that. And so consequently, I was an assistant professor for 4 years. But as you well know, Mike, professors don't make a whole lot of money, and particularly assistant professors. And when you have a growing family, you sort of have to do something else. And two other of my faculty colleagues started a consulting business. And that grew quite rapidly. We were very pleased with that. And the benefit, of course, was that the greater remuneration as a result of that, but it was also taking time away from home and time away from the family. And so you're kind of getting pulled at both ends, as you can understand. And so consequently, one of the consulting assignments we had was with the National Restaurant Association. And I'm always very careful to enunciate those 3 words carefully, National Restaurant Association, as opposed to the NRA,
right?
Because that has a different connotation to many people. So we had the consulting assignment with the National Restaurant Association, and I had the lion's share of that. And when we were making our reports, I came to the attention of the board of directors of that organization, and then all of a sudden there was a vacancy in the top position there. It carried the title in those days of executive vice president, and then 3 or 4 weeks after that happened, I get a call, my very first call, from an executive recruiter. And the executive recruiter says that your name has been suggested to us as someone who would be possibly interested in and a good candidate for this position, which is now open. And indeed, are you interested? And if so, we would like to speak with you. And I almost said no. I mean, these are one of those lucky things in life. I mean, you can go, take one fork in the road or the other, or as Yogi Berra used to say, come to a fork in the road, take it, kind of stuff. And so I said, well, and I thought to myself that I'd really like to go through the process, but I told the individual I couldn't talk now because I was on my way to class, but I'd call back, and we did call back, and I never expected to get the position, and lo and behold, it came to me. And so we, my wife and my 3 children at that point, all young, 6, 4, and 2, I guess, all went to Chicago, Illinois,
Wow.
which is where the headquarters was then
I
at
see.
that time. They're now located in Washington, and I went back with them after I did some other things as well. But we did go to Chicago. Yeah.
And so you joined us here at UCF from Washington.
Yes, well, I have to, let me make a couple of bridges here,
Okay.
Mike. I was with the National Restaurant Association for 5 years in 72 to 77, and then left them to go into the business world because I had been in academia and I'd been in association life, and I really felt a compelling desire to get into the upper reaches of management, corporate environment, and so on. So I left the National Restaurant Association and went to work for a company called Service Systems Corporation in Buffalo, New York, which was fairly close to my hometown, and my parents were ailing at that point, so some of those personal decisions enter into your business decisions as well. And so we were there for 7 years, and near the end of that time, I got a call one day from a member of the board of directors of the association, and there was another vacancy. The same position I had was vacant once again, and in the interim, the organization had moved its headquarters from Chicago to Washington, D.C., which I think is the absolute right location for a major association, because so much of what you're doing is dealing with government legislation, government regulation. A lot of research goes on in the industry, which you can appreciate, and educational components that are there, and so on. And so lo and behold, I regained the position. I'm asked to come back and take that position again. So I was recycled, only this time going to Washington instead of going back to Chicago.
Well, they must have liked something you did the first time.
Well, so it was interesting because somebody once came up to me and he said, "Bill, welcome back. See if you can get it right this time." You know, and he was a Jerry Burns 21 Club in New York.
Well, evidently you did.
Grand guy. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. So here, after you joined us here in '91.
No, I joined the University of Central Florida here in 2001.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and I was in Washington from 1983 until 2001.
Okay.
And for the major part of that time, I was running the National Restaurant Association. And the last 5 years, I ran the American Hotel and Lodging Association, the hotel side of things. So my wife says you're somewhat ambidextrous on the restaurant side and on the hotel side. But Washington, D.C. is an interesting location. We really enjoyed our time there, but I hit a milestone birthday, and I didn't feel that I wanted to continue the commute, and you know, I'd done my stint with congressional testimony on the various issues and that kind of thing, and an opportunity came up here for what they called the Darden Chair. And the Darden Chair is named after, and the funding for it was bequeathed by a gentleman by the name of Bill Darden, who was the founder of Red Lobster Restaurants. Regrettably, he passed away at a young age. But they had this chair back from the early 1990s, and they were not able to fill it. And I say not able to because, as you might know, Mike, being a practitioner but also a Ph.D., is that the academic community places more emphasis on the Ph.D. and the business community places more emphasis on practical experience, and so you've got, you know, this tension that exists here, and so I guess they couldn't find someone who had either the Ph.D., even though he or she might have had wonderful practical experience, or they had the Ph.D. but not much practical experience and that kind of thing. And so they found me, and who had, you know, quite a measure of both. And I hit a milestone birthday. I mean, again, it's one of those things that's.
Was that 40?
Yeah, that's right, 39. I'm kidding. But it's interesting how, you know, some of those personal concerns and interests and considerations leads you to a professional decision. And
I think your profile then fits probably very nicely with UCF, with the metropolitan mission, to be able to bridge between academia and the practical side of things.
There's no question. Well, I am one of the major cheerleaders, I think, not in any kind of formal sense. I certainly don't have a uniform, But whenever I got the opportunity, I really extol the virtues of the University of Central Florida for our industry, the hospitality industry. We have a brand new facility which we began occupying in January of this year, 2004, called the Rosen School. And actually it's now the Rosen College. And our benefactor is a gentleman by the name of Harris Rosen, who I was in school with 45 years ago.
Really?
And so Harris, and he and I were on the swim team.
Wow.
And he still swims. Although I've gone to tennis now, but it's a 159,000 square foot facilities, and if anybody wants an education in the hospitality industry in any of its facets. Restaurants, hotels, theme parks, timeshares, convention and events, cruise lines, airlines, recreation management. I mean, we are the school that would be able to provide that. And we've got a great faculty and a great facility. We now have 1,300 students, and so we're very, very pleased and very proud. And I'm very proud to be and honored, actually, to be a part of it. So it's a good move for us.
Since we primarily look at public safety issues, and clearly we've been quite concerned, especially in this area, with all the attractions and the incredible high rate of tourism.
Yes.
What about you all? Are you all looking at the terrorism impact or the threats of terrorism as far as your industry?
Well, not per se, and not specific in terms of doing any research among our faculty, but we are certainly very attuned to what the industry is doing and to what the federal government is doing. And I'd be interested to know, Mike, what the Department of Criminal Justice might be doing in terms of your focus on the hospitality industry as well. A lot of the public health, if I could put it that way, and safety aspects for us would be on such issues as obesity, which is now one of the leading causes of disease, and everybody's really quite concerned about that because of the side effects of diabetes and so on. Safe and sanitary food principles and practices and that kind of thing. So it's not so much, at least with the restaurants and the hotels, as it would be the airlines, where you really do have the screening devices, or the cruise lines where you really do have the screening devices there. That is more a law enforcement type of function from our perspective than it would be an operations function from within the hospitality industry.
Because what brings it very clearly to the forefront is, like, I guess, Indonesia, where we had tremendous
Jakarta
attacks involving major hotels. And I would think the consequences of a similar event in the United States in a major prominent hotel chain could tremendously impact the entire business and the way you do business. And I guess it would be an interesting challenge to secure hotels. You and I talked previously about our travels in Russia, and recently I was in Russia, and when you go into a hotel in Russia now, and maybe it's been that way, you were there before I was, maybe you have some insight about this, but now there are two security persons at the elevators or the entrances or the access to your rooms, and they very closely, each and every time, screen the guest to make sure you're authorized. And if you don't have, their little access card, you don't get into the hotel.
Right, that's correct. That would be, I think, in the minds of most of the people in our industry, a bit of an overreach in terms of security. Again, every hotel has its own security officer. Every hotel, every restaurant has its own crisis management plan if something were to happen, irrespective of the crisis. I mean, somebody is choking, or there's a robbery that is occurring or whatever, and there are prescribed things that you do when that happens. In other words, you don't argue with someone who is holding a gun on you, kind of thing. But what happened in Jakarta in Indonesia, as you well know, is that a vehicle pulls up in front of a hotel, and then the vehicle explodes, as it did in the barracks over at Lebanon some years ago now, and that kind of thing. And that really is beyond the security range, if you will, of a hotel operator or of a hotel chain. Certainly a lot of the hotel security officers, indeed cruise line security officers and so on, are former government officers of, FBI officers, Secret Service or whatever. So there's a very good, I'm very happy to say, I'm comforted by a very good and strong network among these people in terms of what threats might be forthcoming, or, are we in the yellow zone or the orange zone or wherever. So, but certainly you take an industry like the airlines, and after 9/11, there's no question, but the world has changed. I mean, everybody has said that. It'll never go back to what it was. Probably the screening that goes on now, the X-raying of the bags, the dogs sniffing for drugs and all that kind of thing. It really is a way of life. And I think that most people don't mind a little delay or a little inconvenience, or the fact that they have to take off their shoes, or if they go through the medical detector and they forgot to take off their watch or whatever, and the bell goes off, that they have to step back and take their watch off or whatever, because they know that if that is occurring with them, that's occurring with other people too, to make the skies safe. And in my view, over a period of time, 50 years from now, I'm certainly not going to be around to witness it, but my children will be, and my grandchildren will be. It'll be much better. We will have a much better handle on terrorism. And
well, do you see in your discipline the security aspects and contingency plans for dealing with large-scale terrorist threats or whatever to a hotel or to a service provider? Is that becoming, would you see that become a part of your discipline, or do you see that emerging in other universities?
I don't see it as part of a hospitality curriculum, in large part, Mike. I think that there will be some elements there when we teach business law or that kind of thing. But again, I don't think that people in the hospitality industry regard themselves as more than concerned public citizens, and to be alert, and they don't see themselves necessarily as making citizens arrest unless, there is an unusual circumstance. I think our tendency is to say, leave it to the professionals, and we would look to people such as yourself and in other law enforcement agencies. If there is something that is occurring, we want to deal with the professionals, because we don't want to stumble somehow and upset something that shouldn't be upset, because you've got a plan that is working.
Okay, I understand. So the hotels, as far as you know, the hotel industry itself is not really, of course we know the airline industry now, and there's a great deal of controversy about profiling or screening passengers or guests, however you may want to term them. So you don't see that is becoming some type of viable activity that's going on within.
I think that there's a great more sensitivity on the part of the people who interact with a guest, and certainly within the training programs that are occurring within, again, the various facets of the hospitality industry, which is a huge industry, that people are being sensitized to if someone looks like they have a package and you hear a tick-tock, 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 that might be necessary to call the hotel security officer, for example, just so that we could approach the guest in a positive way and say, could we help you with your bag? And maybe we ask what this noise is that's coming out of there. But again, it's not where somebody would reach over the front desk and grab somebody by the collar and say, I think I've got a terrorist here, or I think I've got somebody who is
or just if there was possible to identify a potential threat, then to alert the security staff or individuals or whatever.
Sure. And the hotel security, I mean, if it were of that nature, the hotel security certainly would be on the phone immediately to the law enforcement officials within that particular jurisdiction.
So to change the focus just a bit, what about your graduates? Are your graduates pretty much in demand throughout the industry?
Well, fortunately, they are, yes. I mean, a lot of our graduates, well, first of all, a lot of our students, I'm going to say about 80% of my students in the classes that I teach, and I think that this is fairly characteristic of my other faculty colleagues, all of the student body, about 80% of them work currently either full-time, I mean, they put in 40 hours or maybe 35 hours, and then they go to school part-time, or if they're working part-time, and they might do 20, 25 hours depending upon what their schedules might be. So they are already working and earning money to pay for college or to pay for the apartment, the fraternity house, sorority house, or whatever. So when they graduate, in a sense, they have a job if they wish to maintain that job for the most part. But of course, now that they've graduated, they are looking for management positions. And we have an increasing number of companies who are coming to the Rosen College for interviewing purposes, and all of the major hotels, all the major restaurant chains, the theme parks are over visiting us, and this is not just Disney and Universal, but it's SeaWorld and others. So I think if one understands, Mike, that travel and tourism, despite all of the turmoil that's going on in the world, is the number one international industry. Now, of course, it's a broad industry, okay, because it does take in airlines and cruise lines and restaurants and hotels and so on. But there are so many opportunities for graduates of our programs and other fine hospitality programs around the country. But I would say, we're certainly within the top 5 of those that the recruiters will come and talk to our young people, and most of them get jobs. Some, of course, want to go on for a master's in, let's say, business or whatever, even if you want to go on for Ph.D.s. And I tell them that you don't make much money doing that, but that, and we have a fair number from family businesses as well, that mom and dad are running the restaurant, or mom and dad have a hotel or a couple of hotels or whatever, and they'll go back in the family business.
Yeah, because I can see that we all have the experience. I guess there's nothing, probably a few things more discouraging than having a bad experience at a hotel or for accommodations or a restaurant, and it's probably also the opposite. It's an incredibly good experience to go to a hotel or go to a restaurant and have good service and feel welcome and enjoy your stay there. And I've often thought about when you go to a major hotel complex, it's a very complicated activity and entity that's going there to make all those things work and
well, you have several departments within a hotel, of course, and for the guest who is checking in, one might only see a small portion of all of the things that are happening to ensure that that guest is going to have a enjoyable stay, a comfortable stay, for the length of stay that he or she chooses to have. That same is true in the restaurants, is that there are a lot of people in what we call the heart of the house. Some people call it the back of the house. The production elements that you don't see because it's in the kitchen, as well as the service staff, the bartenders and the servers and the bus persons and so on. So a lot of things go into making your experience a delightful one, so that not only will you come back to that restaurant which you enjoyed, but you'll continue to eat out more frequently in the future. I don't know I give a fair number of public speeches, and one of the things I often surprise people with, and I would ask you, just if you consider that you eat 21 meals a week. All right, now that's 7 days in the week, and that's 3 meals a day. Now you may eat more or less than that. You may skip breakfast and snack at night, or whatever those things are. But let's assume 21. The question that I would ask you is how many of those meals are taken away from home? And now out of the 21, you're an employed person, I'm an employed person, and I don't bring a lunch pail and I don't bring a brown bag, so I've got 5 lunches for the Monday through Friday work week that I experience. I'll take my family out, for my wife now, our kids are up and out, but when they were with us, we'd go over to the club on a Friday night, so that's 6. My wife and I would probably go shopping on, the mall, and eat in the mall food court, so that's 7. Then whatever we do on a Sunday morning after religious services, if we go to religious services, and and go get pancakes or whatever it might be. So you're up at 8. Now you travel quite a bit. Okay, so you're on the airlines, you're staying in a hotel, you're going down to the coffee shop, you're going down to the dining room, you're going out to dinner at night. So with your business travels, and then you got your vacation time on top of that, probably on an annualized basis, if you actually were to do the mathematics, probably 10 or 11 meals per week are taken away from home. That's roughly 50%. And a lot of people don't. Do you go out to eat very often? Well, no, not really. Well, they really do. They really do. Because their definition of going out to eat is maybe fine dining. But if they really analyze what it is that they're doing when they're stopping and getting donuts in the morning, or they're going out for lunch with their friends, in the 45 minutes that they have, or eating in the company cafeteria, or the school cafeteria, or the hospital cafeteria, as the case may be, because there's a lot of that institutional feeding as well.
And that's true. And I eat out a lot. And I appreciate good service and a good meal. And I've gotten to the point where I've become less tolerant of bad service.
And Mike, I think you should be less tolerant of bad service. And it's not because you're getting more persnickety or crotchety or anything like that. It's just that you have the expectation, because the restaurants, by and large, and the hotels, by and large, are providing better service. They're doing a much better job in training than they did 10 years ago. In fact,